Looks like Donald Trump is inching closer to invoking the Insurrection Act of 1807 to allow him to deploy the military on domestic soil, to allow him to federalize National Guard's troops because he's getting frustrated by federal judges that oppose him. He's already said the quiet part out loud that he's strongly considering invoking the Insurrection Act. We already had people in the administration after 2020 try to push Donald Trump into invoking the Insurrection Act then, after he didn't like the outcome of the 2020 election. You had people like Jeffrey Clark and others around Donald Trump in the Department of Justice who were MAGA, who wanted the Insurrection Act invoked. And now Stephen Miller is actively campaigning. We already know he has the ear of Donald Trump as the deputy White House chief of staff. He's already using the language of insurrection. We just saw Stephen Miller say out loud after he didn't like the ruling of Judge Immergut in Oregon, in which she said Donald Trump's view of Portland and Oregon is not tethered to reality or to the facts. Stephen Miller responded that we have a legal insurrection going on, an insurrection against the laws and the Constitution of the United States. He effectively called Judge Immergut a terrorist at a time where we're in a tinderbox ready to explode of political violence. I'm Michael Popok. You're on the MeidasTouch Network and Legal AF. Let's take a hard look at the Insurrection Act. Now, Donald Trump was asked during a presser yesterday whether he would consider invoking the Insurrection Act since his right-hand man, Stephen Miller, is using the I word over and over again. And here's what he had to say about that. Let's run the clip.
Would you invoke the Insurrection Act, sir?
What?
The Insurrection Act? Under what conditions or terms would you invoke?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe. And it's turning out, and we started with D.C. It's been so successful. You look at what's happened with Portland over the years. It's a burning hellhole. And then you have a judge that lost her way, that tries to pretend that, like, there's no problem. Actually, she's not even saying that. There's a huge problem in Portland. I'll tell you what the problem is. Crime. Okay, crime. There's a huge problem in Chicago. It's called crime. And we want to put out the crime, and they want to inflame the crime.
We are close. If we're not at midnight, we're at 5 to midnight on the Insurrection Act clock for Donald Trump. I mean, let's just look at what that allows him to do. We say in general, it allows deploying the military. It suspends the Posse Comitatus Act, which prevents the use of the military on domestic soil. It allows Donald Trump to federalize the National Guard of each state and to use it to suppress a rebellion or domestic violence. And all of those terms are ill-defined among the Supreme Court, notwithstanding the fact it's been on the books since 1807. There's not a lot of agreed upon definitions of insurrection and rebellion. We saw that very thing during the oral argument 3 years ago now, about the Insurrection Act and whether Donald Trump was going to be kept off the ballot or not. When Colorado bounced him from the ballot as being an insurrectionist, there was a whole debate among the United States Supreme Court about whether he was an insurrectionist or not, and what is an insurrection. And you heard them struggling with it. Let me play you a clip from the Supreme Court back in the Colorado insurrection hearing so that you understand how muddled this area of the law really is. Let's play that clip.
All right. Final question. The Colorado Supreme Court concluded that the violent attempts of the petitioner's supporters in this case to halt the count on January 6th qualified as an insurrection, as defined by Section 3. And I read your opening brief to accept that those events counted as an insurrection. But then your reply seemed to suggest that they were not. So what is your position as to that?
We never accepted or conceded in our opening brief that this was an insurrection. What we said in our opening brief was President Trump did not engage in any act that can plausibly be characterized as insurrection.
All right, so why would this not be what is your argument that it's not? Your reply brief says that it wasn't because I think you say it did not involve an organized attempt to overthrow the government. So
that's one of many reasons. But for an insurrection, there needs to be an organized, concerted effort to overthrow the government of the United States through violence. And so
the point is that a chaotic effort to overthrow the government is not an insurrection?
No, we didn't concede that it's an effort to overthrow the government either, Justice Jackson, right? None of these criteria were met. This was a riot. It was not an insurrection. The events were shameful, criminal, violent, all of those things, but it did not qualify as insurrection as that term is used in Section 3.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
Now, the Insurrection Act of 1807, which is in our statutes as 10 United States Code 251, 252, and 253, has been invoked about 30 times by various presidents. The last time, George H. Bush in 1992 during the riots in LA, the Rodney King riots. Some of the sections of the Insurrection Act require states to agree, but we've already seen some courts say, well, they don't really have to agree. Others, the president can act unilaterally. So under 10 U.S.C. 252, for instance, it says whenever the president considers that unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages or rebellion against the authority of the U.S. makes it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States in any state, he may call into federal service such of the militia of any state as such of the armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce the laws or suppress the rebellion. In 253, the president, by using the militia or armed forces, or both, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States. You see how broad these powers are. And federal courts and the Supreme Court have effectively said that the president gets to call the rebellion. He gets, whatever he says is the insurrection, the rebellion, the domestic violence stands. Now, there's some other case law that says federal courts have an oversight role, that if the president oversteps this broad power or is acting in bad faith, which is certainly an argument here, since he keeps calling Portland, Oregon, a hellhole when it is not, and the facts show that it's not, as Judge Immergut just ruled. There is very limited ability to rein in an out-of-control president using the Insurrection Act and sending in the military to occupy blue states. And Donald Trump is moving us dangerously close to that moment. Carolyn Levitt was asked about, this seems to all have been triggered by Judge Immergut on the heels of Judge Breyer in San Francisco. Judge Immergut just the other day, on Saturday, issued her ruling, which said that Donald Trump is moving us towards martial law and away from the rule of law and the constitutional republic that we are. That his basis for nationalizing or attempting to commandeer the Portland, Oregon National Guard is not tethered to reality. That triggered Caroline Levitt, the press secretary. Here's what she had to say.
Joey. Judge over the weekend. Sorry, my second question. A federal judge over the weekend that the president had appointed to the bench in his first term in office basically argued that he could not deploy other states' National Guards to Portland. Basically said that it was untethered, his argument, to what is actually happening on the ground. Which local officials in Portland have said that the National Guard is needed there?
With all due respect to that judge, I think her opinion is untethered in reality and in the law. The president is using his authority as commander-in-chief, U.S. Code 12406, which clearly states that the president has the right to call up the National Guard in cases where he deems it's appropriate. And if you look at what has happened in Portland, Oregon, for more than 100 nights, I was talking to our law enforcement team about it this morning, for more than 100 days, night after night after night, the ICE facility has been really under siege by these anarchists outside. They have been disrespecting law enforcement. They've been inciting violence. We saw, again, a guillotine rolled out in front of this federal building. And so the president wants to ensure that our federal buildings and our assets are protected. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. And ultimately, in the case in Los Angeles, that judge ruled in the Ninth Circuit that panel of judges ruled that those troops could remain and that the president was well within his authority to do so. So we are appealing that decision. As you know, we expect a hearing on it pretty quickly, and we're very confident in the president's legal authority to do this, and we're very confident we will win on the merits of the law.
So this is what the blue state governors and mayors are going to have to worry about, that Donald Trump, when he is rejected by the federal courts doing their job, that he pushes the doomsday button and he goes to the Insurrection Act, and then all hell breaks loose. You think that, this is like Abraham Lincoln in reverse. It's the first time in American history. Donald Trump's not using it to quell and suppress rebellion. He's trying to embarrass and undermine the Democratic base and the Democratic brand and flex his muscle. He's losing at the polls. He's got nothing else to lose. His economy is in the crapper. His presidency is too. The pollings say the American people are allergic to him and are rejecting him, And so he is like a riverboat gambler with nothing to lose. So we're going to have to stay vigilant here and continuing to follow him and make sure that the courts are prepared to challenge him and use whatever limited oversight abilities they have to rein in this out of control, overgrown president. I'll continue to follow it right here on the MeidasTouch Network and in Legal AF. Take a minute, slide over to the Legal AF YouTube channel where we're following this 10 times a day. We got a new video up. Legal AF Substack, I do lives twice a day just to catch you up at the minute, at the market, at the moment about developments. And we do this all together here on the MeidasTouch Network as well. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.